We're on.
Fantastic.
So,
We are live in ICSD safety. This is HR work session. We will open the public meeting, start with public comment. I assume we don't have any. Does anyone in the audience choose to speak? No? No? All right, great. I would move to approve the minutes from our November 19th work session.
Yep,
Would you
look them over. You look them over.
look them over?
Right.
Excellent.
Good.
All right, well then we will jump right into discussion items. We're grateful to have our HR team here. In our last meeting on November 19th, we talked at length about recruitment strategies, what the district has been doing, is planning to do, in the process of doing, and had an opportunity to kind of brainstorm collectively and talk about potential ideas for investing in alternatives and additional ways to recruit high quality staff in the ICSD. So I will turn it over to you all. Today we are going to move from kind of recruitment to what happens once we have recruited somebody and they've expressed interest in working here. What is the application process? What does it look like for them to be able to apply to the position and hopefully get a job offer?
Great. Well, thank you for having us. So this, for those of you that have been following the HR committee, this is we talked a little bit about this last year, but this is a evergreen topic. So I think it's probably talked about it almost every month, but we wanted to spend a little bit of time with a short PowerPoint presentation, and I'm really just going to take us through the actual, like if you click on this link, what does it look like? What are your options? And sort of do a live tour of what your options are when you're applying to the school district. So we'll do that. We'll kind of walk you through what that can look like as far as we can get. Probably not going to log anyone in, and then we can talk a little bit, have a discussion, and go from there. So the first thing to know is we use a tool called RecruitFront for all of our applications for really any role in the school district. In New York State and then across the nation, there's lots of different tools. We landed on RecruitFront. We used a different tool for a number of years, which has come up in previous conversations. And we have found that this tool got us the most applicants as an overall pool. But we have dabbled at looking at different portals where you can collect applications. The reason I'm saying this is a common question is, oh, you used to use the old system. Why are you using this one now? So just to let folks know, we've been using RecruitFront for what, 3.5 years now, something like that. Yeah. And the benefit of it is that a lot of school districts, particularly in Central and Western New York, are moving towards it. Downstate and in the East, they use a different system. This system integrates in terms of data with our HRIS, Human Resources Information System, and then helps us convert applicants to employees without having to have sort of redundant entries. One of the criticisms that we used to have for a long time was when I come and I join the organization, like, you're asking me my name, like, you know who I am, you're inviting me to the interview. Why are you asking my name? Why are you asking where I'm from? You have that information. So now we actually take that information we already downloaded. So the onboarding is a lot cleaner, and that's a huge benefit of the system. And then one of the biggest challenges we used to run into is just name spellings, really specific name spelling. You know who the people that tend to spell their names correctly are the people themselves. So if you enter in your name, we take that name directly. If you don't know the person, you might swap out an E and an I or something like that, and that can cause challenges over time. So just wanted to throw that out there for anyone that was wondering, but we've been using RecruitFront. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to click on the link for RecruitFront.
I also wanted to add before we go to this. So we decided to go to RecruitFront. It was a tool to streamline. So RecruitFront is a portal of SchoolFront. And so we were able to streamline our recruitment to hire process, and allow that to also be a digital onboarding. So that was, one of the decision makers for recruit front versus the other application and online systems that we were using.
So if you look on the Ithaca City School District website, and actually, in fact, I'll start at the front page. On the front page of the district website, so ithacacitysschools.org, we actually have a careers button. So it's like right up in the front in the top. So that's one of our first easiest entry points if you wanted to check our website. Additionally, when we post jobs, it gets cross-posted through a lot of other different systems, and we can talk more about that. But this, if someone just Googled Ithaca City School District, careers is right there. If you click on careers, it takes us to a subsection of the HR website. And a recent update that we made, we used to have a whole list of all the openings right here. And one of the criticisms and feedback items that we received from the community was that was nice, except for it wasn't always up to date because we'll send these changes over and there'll be delays, or sometimes if something gets posted urgently and doesn't make it over. So what we did is we decided to directly link to Recruit Front for our external applicants. So that takes us directly to the portal. And now if you're here, that's where all of the jobs and opportunities happen. So when you look, you get a breakdown of the different jobs that are out there: instructional, food service, nurses, extracurricular. And also will break them down by location if a location is designated. Sometimes a position is district-wide, right, or continuous recruitment, and won't have a specific location, but sometimes it does. So let's just look at instructional. If you go ahead and click on instructional, you can see different openings. For example, we have an elementary special education opening, and you can go ahead and click on that, and will give us the school and then a description of the job, the requirements, the writing sample prompts and questions, and then the salary range down at the bottom. And then it gives us specific, if you want to apply, here's what you need to do. So that's sort of like took you from our website to a specific job to then the part where you would have to click in and start developing your own profile. So before we go further, what questions might you have?
I have a few. I'm just curious.
Sure.
How much do platforms like this cost? I'm just genuinely curious.
That's a good question. So we actually have one called a co-cert with BOCES to have this. And I would say and I'm going to give a ballpark, but it's like, I don't want to give the exact, but it's somewhere between 25 to have the whole portal. And that includes
staff side.
Yeah.
And then, that includes HR. Okay, great.
Our own database that goes with it. And then, so anytime someone applies on the back end, we get every job, it groups the folks, it adds applicants, it allows us to auto mail them, send out digital onboarding through the whole software that we have.
And then you've talked a couple of times about feedback you've gotten on the process. Can I just hear what is the mechanism for getting feedback from people who accept and people who don't? And how do you
so we're in continual dialogue with all of our union leadership teams. So usually the standard way that we get feedback is, in a weekly or monthly meetings, folks will bring up, hey, this posting here was a challenge, or hey, we're not getting a lot. Do you think you could change it this way? So there's a lot of feedback that way. And then also hiring managers as well. When someone's and what hiring manager means is a school principal might be looking for a specific position, and then they'll submit their forms to us, we'll post the job, and they'll give feedback as well. So there's been a lot of iterations over the last several years, and then we're continually making updates to different forms and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know if you mentioned this, you probably did, but so when we post on Recruit Front, it does automatically then get posted onto Indeed as well, so.
Has there been a time where you've put more kind of like sales pitchy language on the website itself when somebody first goes to that careers button to kind of talk, like we were talking about last time about the kind of unique aspects of working in this district?
On Recruit Prime itself.
On
that
like the
page.
first careers page on
like
our
over
website
here, for
there.
example.
Yeah, like almost like
Yeah, like
join
under
team
29, yeah.
ICSD, here's
right.
why type of thing.
Yeah, we've had, so there was in the past a recruitment tab to the website. We had a video on there. So yeah, that's something that, we would, we thought of like just bringing back, but there was that.
Can you scroll back up to the writing tasks? I'm curious.
On the, gotcha,
Yeah,
yeah,
application.
yeah, so, sure,
I just would love a rationale behind
yeah,
the writing sample. What is the length that you're expecting?
We talked about that a little last year too.
yeah, so the short answer is, probably 2017, 18, the district worked in close partnership with the ILC to look at what are the,
Sorry, just to tell everyone, EILC.
Yeah, Equity and Inclusion Leadership Council.
so a community group that really wanted, sort of look at how we can, represent the diverse student body we have in our hiring practices and sort of represent our community. So one of our first questions, or one of our ways in our commitments to supporting diversity and equity in hiring practice is the first question, which asks folks to specifically name and identify sort of how they can ensure success of all their prospective students across, a range of students that you might have. So that's where that one comes from. The second question is just a sort of like a tell us about yourself, like what do we need to know type question. And then the third question dates back to probably also the mid 2015 when we sort of were actually very technologically advanced at that time, going to one-to-one model. So asking folks questions about how you might leverage technology in instruction. So those were identified by groups as the three most important areas. That answers the first part. The second part, in terms of expectations for response length, I'd say it varies. It's much like when I was a classroom teacher. It's not always like how many words did you write, but what's the summation of and meaning of your writing. So usually within a paragraph or so, you can get an idea of what folks are.
And it also says cover letter. There's a cover letter as well.
Yes.
So you can include this with your cover letter, and that was in trying to streamline the upload of it, where if someone wants to include it with their cover letter, then we'll see. It's just offering different options of how to upload.
I'm not sure, is it appropriate for me to share feedback or just my thoughts on this? Or should I wait or?
Can I add also that when this writing sample came in and part of the recruitment and retention plan at the ILC, we were getting hundreds of teacher applications. And it was, part of the screening process to see, okay, how does this applicant, gauging district values, gauging how their understanding of equity, inclusion, and then there was the technology, and that part there was some New York State Ed had put in some technological guidance, in addition to us being a digital school district. So there was that where we got so many applications, and it's like, okay, how do we appropriately screen these applications to find the candidate that we need?
I think it would be helpful maybe to try to think as much as we can about questions versus feedback, only because in part we did talk about this a lot last year. I do think that the feedback is important, but also to kind of keep it moving a little bit. So if you have questions about the piece, maybe we could do that. I also wanted to just, correct me if I don't phrase this right, Zach, but one of the things that you and I were talking about kind of aligning board goals with the goals of this work is that these are also very reflective of the goals that the board identified at that time of being like front and center to this is what we want to see you focus on as you're recruiting staff. So that's another reason that like place that this came from was being really responsive to the board and to the board and district goals about what the like one piece of the priority piece of what they were looking for.
Yeah, we just add in a district, like if you look around the state, for example, in a district that's really emphasizing like certain, literacy practices, they might ask specific questions about that because they might have a value that says, hey, every teacher we have will, have a strong understanding of this or that. So that, that's a great way to look at it. And what that means, there's probably two questions that I would actually have with the board in relation to this is, the first thing is, as we go forward, also recognizing the realities of things like AI and the ability to sort of like prompt response generate, are there better ways that we want to discuss identifying this in our candidate pools, particularly considering that the number of, this was set up at a time, as Kira says, when candidate pools were much larger, right? And we actually had to sort of like find ways to separate things out. Now we're in a different environment where we might need to be, we're trying to find ways to bring people in. So the questions I'd have is how can we make sure our board values, ideas, our district desire to be diverse and equitable, how do we make sure those are reflected in a modern hiring environment? That's actually like the driving question that Lavira and I have. So we'd be open to discussions about maybe how we change and modify this in the future, and figure out, how can we connect those two values.
One question that I have is, questions are incredibly important and understand and I would hope that we have teachers within our classrooms who are emulating this. And so the question for me is not like, are these valuable, but is this the most valuable way of gleaning this information? Right. I know that they're also asked in the interviews questions similar to this or along these same themes. There's also the idea of like, if you put out a statement, like I was talking about, like on the front page that said, this is our mission and values as a district, one would expect for the most part that only it would be any more likely that somebody would choose to or not to apply based on that than they would make up an answer for this that would be quite easy as well. And so it's just that question of like, I know as like someone who has applied to jobs of if I saw that I had to do a writing sample and a cover letter, before I even got to go into an application, I probably just wouldn't do it, especially if there were other similar jobs that were not requiring all of that. But my big question is, you guys have done, this has been on for, 7 or so years, it sounds like, except for the odd person that I could imagine being like, I don't care, this doesn't matter. Like, how many would you really say you read one of the 3 of these answers, especially the first and even the third one, and be like, oh, like this does not speak to our ethos, or you don't sound like somebody who, like, I'm even wondering about number 1 of someone who would be like, I really don't know, I haven't had that many opportunities, but I know I believe in, and would that be something that would make you not, like, what is it that you're either both looking for and would be like, absolutely not, that you've actually like seen in practice?
I mean, it's always good to see where a person is in their journey of understanding. We are a district that uses a lot of, I would say we're ahead in our understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion. And so that's where we've seen that in those writing samples. And also understand, okay, here's where they're at in their journey. And we have so much support in our micro credentialing. Yeah. And that's not something that's going to disqualify someone. It's only going to inform us on how we need to better support Especially if they are a person that says, I love children, this is why I wanna be a teacher. Not everyone is at that point of understanding or had access to all of the language and learning that, many of our educators have had. So it's more to see, okay, placement and their journey. And we have seen writing samples where we're like, no, this is not the place for you, So
But how often though? I guess that's
I think that's fairly rare.
that is really, yeah.
And I'd say that the writing samples become more important with the larger that the candidate pool gets, right? Because if you have if you look down a little bit here, it says all candidates must possess New York State teacher certification, right? So when we're short in certified teachers, we have to interview them if they're qualified, and there's no sort of reason not to. So ultimately, if we have a large pool, then yeah, we're going to be more selective. But that's the challenge. We haven't had many really large pools for the last year.
Yeah, I agree with that, what Emily said, that like there is value in each of these questions. I don't, as a hiring manager, I don't see the value in them though for all candidates at the beginning. And I also am not sure those would be the top three. Like there's nothing about teaching strategies or classroom management or just overall relationships. Instead, these are leading questions that a candidate would. Yeah, like if I don't believe any of these things, I can still get AI to give me a beautiful answer, as all the high schoolers in the room know. And so I think everyone here would get hired. They would say, put it in ChatGPT and say, give me an answer that'll get me hired. And I'm sure. I'm sure.
No, I think it's a good point, because and I'm just thinking, even as a psychologist also, an open-ended question is a different response than a closed-ended question. So an open-ended question saying, why are you interested in teaching in the school district? How will you conduct yourself in your role here in the district? Which is very, very broad, of course. But then that gives people the chance to say, well, this is what I value, this is who I am, and this is what I plan to do. And they don't know what, what you're looking for.
And I just want to name, I'm saying this like, these questions are like, as you said, like old now. So I'm just saying like, in the new reality. So I'll just name like a couple of things that I wonder if you all would consider. Because what I heard in the last HR meeting was we want it to be easier for people to apply. So I've applied for a lot of jobs when I was trying to move to Ithaca, because it's hard to move to Ithaca and get jobs. And some of the things that were really helpful was one, I don't know if RecruitFront has it, but a platform where you can, like essentially a person can take a video of themselves answering questions, where the question is set and it just be something like, why do you want to be a teacher? It gives them a minute to respond. And then you can review it at 2 times speed, so it's helpful for hiring managers. Or just like a series of short open-ended questions instead of a cover letter. So that like as part of an application, it's insert your resume and then answer these 3 questions, which are very open-ended. I know personally I have not applied for jobs because I think cover letters are so annoying. But I have applied for jobs when it's like a resume and a couple of short questions where based on the response, we have enough of a sense of them to know if we want to move forward.
Yeah, as we acknowledged, I think all of this is open for debate. The question to me really is not so much are these valuable questions, but how in this world of AI and modern technology, might we be able to better identify that? And if we're talking about tangible next steps, I think we'd be happy to come back in a month or 2 with some potential different workflows if it's the wish of the board to say, hey, would you be interested in thinking about different ways that this could work with the following goals? Figure out how to identify these values during the interview process, and figure out a way to streamline the application, minimize the clicks. Like on my responsibilities on the tech side, we want to minimize the clicks, right? If someone's clicking here, upload this, we're inviting more opportunities for frustration and failure. And what we've identified for a lot of our conversations is we want to eliminate as many barriers. So, certainly something that we'd be happy to come back with different concepts.
All right, we're gonna turn it back over to you, so we can keep going.
Sure. Yeah. So if we, there's not too much more on this side, but ultimately, what would happen is if someone wants to apply to a job here, they're going to go to, they're gonna go in and they have to create their own recruit front profile. And when you go in there, at this point, well, you get verified, so we'll do that. But at this point, it'll start like asking for specific identifying data. So we're not going to take it too much further than that. But the main thing I just want to show is that people would then go in. There's a video on how to do it, all the different things you need to do. And that's where you would go to set up your profile. So that's the first part. And then the next part is what happens on our end. So we have Schoolfront, which is sort of the companion product to RecruitFront. Schoolfront is where all of our where we do digital onboarding. It's where all the candidates get filtered into the jobs that they apply. We have a giant database of all of our applicants, so we can actually like cross-reference or look, have they applied to jobs in the past? What other certifications might they hold? Oh, has this person applied and been, made it to a previous round? This is why we like these tools, to be clear. Previously, it was all, for the most part, triplicates plus our old system. So if someone applied before, we didn't necessarily know that unless we were going to go scour files from 5 or 6 years ago. Now we have that information. So on our side, we're going to get a job once the job, or as the job is ongoing, the hiring manager, when someone applies, gets a notification and it says, hey, someone's applied, and they can actually go in immediately and look at the applicant. This is a huge step up in for us, because previously hiring managers would have to wait until it's over to even know if people had applied, or they'd have to call into HR. Now they can sort of live time, if they're a tracker of that opening, they can like see who's applying, which is really helpful.
Can I help in?
Yeah.
Clarification on that. So when we are hiring right now, like we have, X number of special or elementary special education. Is it? I thought that meant that let's say we had the openings of like 3 different schools.
Yep.
Do you like specify that like this one, that like you have to go through this application to be the one at BJM versus South Hill? But I'm just thinking about the hiring manager. Like, is there necessarily a hiring manager?
So there's district-wide ones. So like for special ed, our director of special ed would be the hiring manager for that, and he's probably going to facilitate the process. Sometimes a specific role will open, right? And then that might be the building principal or assistant principal or whoever's in charge.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
We did for district elementary in the summer. Then there were the principals that were appointed, so they would take turns being on the interview committees, and then whoever had a vacancy, then it was just communicated, okay, we would then have a second round to then do placement.
Yeah, I'd say elementary education candidates and special education candidates that's the 2 certifications we have the most staff members in. So you'll have lots, handfuls of openings across. So that requires a bit more coordination, but otherwise it's usually a building based.
Okay.
But also, like, one thing I do almost every day is I check our applicant pool to just see like who are the recent applicants, and I'll often do internal checks to make sure we're bringing folks along. So what happens is folks come in and we screen them. There is something about civil service here, and let me see if I can do civil service in like 30 seconds or less. But what that means is not that it's not important, but teachers have to be certified by New York State. Other positions, many of our positions like in transportation, food service, custodial, many of our clerical staff are governed by civil service. And what that means is the city of Ithaca is our sort of like oversight group for civil service. And those roles are tied to a test that people have to take, and people can qualify for the jobs through tests. And then they have to then get the job, and if they score in the right range, they can become permanent. And so civil service has a lot of hoops. So sometimes with those roles, it takes a while to get we have to canvass and see if there's people that are on the list. And it's a system designed to make sure that we allow equitable access and ability for people to get roles in our organization.
And they have to apply.
They have to apply
on their website, right? On the like.
Yeah, so if
city
it's a civil
website.
service position, there are competitive positions which require an exam and non-competitive do not require an exam, but still fall under civil service. And so when we hire someone, that is, through a civil service position, they do also, apply through civil service, so that civil service then starts tracking their work experience. And then there's a provisional probationary, if there is a list, so canvassing requires us to say to civil service, we have this vacancy open. They will then ask, anyone who has taken the exam, they will send out what is a notice to see, are you interested? Ithaca City School District is hiring, please reply by this time if you're interested. If we have at least 3 people on that list, it is what is constituted as a binding list that we have to hire from. And then that takes priority over any type of like internal collective bargaining agreement, which we can explain. So there is a process to it that may at times delay our hiring because we have to follow that civil service rule.
Okay.
30 seconds. See, we tried. And then we also review the certifications of folks that in teaching positions or administrative positions. So once we screen the candidates, so at this point, if we had like, let's say 50 candidates, you would, based on resumes, responses, things like that, you would choose the candidates we want to bring in for an interview, usually somewhere between like 3 and 8 candidates, depending on the positions and the number of openings. So then what happens is you have your interview committee. And in this case, the committee sets a date and time, and then we have processes with all of our different union groups in terms of they can have stakeholders that they appoint to these committees. And then so the representatives are then appointed to the committee. All of these stakeholders that are on these committees have to go through a stakeholder training where we talk about bias, we talk about hiring practices, we talk about what the committee needs to do and what the committee cannot do. We have to make these decisions based on the information we have. We can't make assumptions, right? And then there's a whole lot of protected classes that we have to be cognizant of in terms of when we're evaluating a candidate and their ability to do the job. So there's a lot of pre-work that goes into making sure our committees are set up to do this. One of the really important things to know about the interview process, the chair of the committee makes the determination of what candidate is suggested to move forward for final approval. The work of the committee is to provide a recommendation on whether they think the candidates could do the job in the skills or with the skills and responsibilities that the job entails. So the reason I say that is a long time ago, it used to be that we'd have an interview committee and we'd say, all right, here's our person, everyone who, yes, no, maybe, right, and we picked. What we found now in this, particularly with this job market, is that if you just select one person out of a pool, like you can indicate which person you think is the best candidate. Each person as a stakeholder can do that. But if you only pick one person, not everyone ends up coming here. Some people say, oh, actually, I'm not going to move here, right? So what we're asking our committees to do is provide us a recommendation of which candidates you think could do the job well for us and would be able to do what we need. So that's the ask of the committee. And then based on that information, the hiring manager is going to, proceed along in the process. And what that means is hiring manager is going to make a verbal offer to the candidate, check references, and then make the final recommendations that then go to us in HR. HR is then going to look at what their salary would be, work with the hiring manager and the candidate to make sure that they know what their offer is, the position, location, compensation levels. And then ultimately then it's going to go to a board report. And that's the short version of it, but it's multi-layered. And the reason it's layered that way is that it's really important that we, as a public organization, have a process that sort of checks and goes through all of the steps.
So one point of clarification on
Yeah.
that, because the designated hiring manager isn't necessarily going to be the direct supervisor, how much collaboration is there in that final decision and recommendation coming from the hiring manager? So for instance, if there were,
Yeah, so what you're asking is this happens with elementary education candidates, for example. Maybe Gladira, myself, and a principal will be on the committee with some teachers, and we'll have 8 elementary education candidates that come through. Maybe 3 of them are great. We have spots, 3 openings, but the principals are not there. In those cases, if we think we need to move immediately, we'll call the principal and say, hey, can you get on the phone and chat with this candidate and just, tell them about your school, tell them we're really interested. And almost always we'll try to set up a second interview with the actual direct supervisor.
but with just the candidate that's being.
Yeah, for that role. Yeah, so that's what we'll do. For other roles, for example, sometimes for an ESP role, but that might be the special education director will be involved. And because the special education director will manage that entire process and then inform the principal, hey, I have a really great candidate. They're going to work with this student for this situation. And in that case, there's just a sort of a background dialogue between the 2 folks that would be the most likely to be responsible for that candidate. So usually just back either a dialogue or a second.
Yeah.
How do the committee chairs get selected is one question that I have, who would the committee chair be, and is it always a certain type, always principal,
Yeah.
always a teacher?
It's always the principal or director is always going to chair it.
It's the hiring manager. It's
Yeah,
the same person.
And Lydia runs trainings for those folks on the processes that they need to go through. One of the things, for example, is we've trained our hiring managers on follow-up questions, which is the dialogue we had last year. And what that means is that, it's our structured follow-up question bank, which is one of the criticisms, and in a helpful way was, hey, we have set questions. Could we have follow-up questions? So now that the hiring manager who's chairing the committee has a bank of questions where they can ask follow-ups. Yeah, let me see if I can move that.
I think you can just write it down.
There we go.
And
And
one
the chair
more,
is the,
you can do this follow-up.
I just wanna make sure, so the chair is the decision maker, if I'm a principal, an elementary principal, I decide who I hire.
Well, so that's the point I think is important that I would love to dive into more at some point. As we all know, the relationship between a employee and their supervisor is an extremely important one, and managers are lead in completely different ways and are really a good fit for some employees and not a great fit for others. But what they were saying is, and what I know has happened in a number of the elementary schools, is that a principal who is actually going to be inheriting that candidate never gets to talk to any of the other candidates. So if they're not on that committee and they're not the hiring manager, they might not ever talk to the other candidates. So they do get an opportunity to say hello and speak to the candidate that's been recommended. But if there were, imagine if you were hiring somebody, if there were 3 people you were looking at, part of it is them being able to make a judgment of do I want to be working for that principal? Do I like the way that they run their school? Those, and vice versa, where's that fit of making sure, yes, they are a good candidate for, being a special education teacher or a 3rd grade teacher, but thinking about those connections between like the personnel connections within a building are not always there, as much as I'm sure.
Yeah, my old school, we actually shifted towards a different, like, we shifted from what you're describing to every principal had access to every candidate, like for the
Yeah.
materials.
So we used to run a more interactive process with like a couple rounds and some model lessons, and all the principals were here and folks would sort of filter through. That's not something we have done recently. And I think part of the reason has to do with the candidate pools. I also think that's around COVID. I think we stopped doing that for sort of reasons at the time. And then, but you know, again, it's certainly something we could discuss. I will say, when we make recommendations, we do our very best to, you know, give folks a chance to like tell them like here's what the pool was. Here's like I know my conversations are. We interviewed 3 people. This one person, I know you have a first grade end opening. This person has a ton of experience in 5th grade. We're going to steer them towards this. So we usually try to provide background on it. But you know, there's not a perfect way, but that's how.
Who is the community representatives and how do you become one, or how are they selected?
Yes.
Yeah, so these are the stakeholders, community representatives are usually appointed through boards at Ithaca. Actually, so we have a list of stakeholders. The stakeholders are made up of Ithaca Teachers Association representatives, Employees Association, all of our bargaining units can appoint a stakeholder to be on any of our interview committee. And then we also do have the community representatives, which was our appointed village at Ithaca.
PTA is also.
And there, yeah, so sorry, I didn't run through the whole, so there's ITA, EA, Employees Association, the support, so the ESPs. We also have the Service Employees PTA, Special Education PTA can also appoint a person, community representatives, and substitutes. So we'll send out a stakeholder notice asking for representation on a committee, and all of those groups can appoint someone.
The key thing is if they're appointed, they need to take the stakeholder training. So
Yes.
sometimes
Ask the predetermined.
Well-
Like regardless of who's on it, it sounds like the questions.
the questions are predetermined. Yes, but and the key thing for us is that they also understand our processes. So we've ran into friction in the past when folks don't know, like, oh, this is what we're doing. Here's how we're trying to do it. So to answer Adam's question directly, folks that are interested, you kind of look at what is like if you're in a bargaining unit, you work through that group. If you're a community member who is on a PTA, for example, you always try to go through that. If you're beyond that, there's perhaps there's some other groups, but you don't
Yeah,
get a
we
lot
have-
of that.
We have the
Honestly.
leader sorry.
Yeah.
We have the leader representative, so if it's a president, that has been appointed, so if Catherine is the one that, appoints folks, because there's a certain order, in order to avoid appointing the same people to be on the, same committee, and also keeping into consideration if we're hiring, for a specific, building, having representation from that building. We may have bus drivers on for ESP interviews. So we want a well-rounded committee. And then also ensuring that the process in appointing the stakeholders is fair. So we have appointed folks that will receive our emails to say, could you appoint a representative from your group? If that makes sense.
Okay. I'm thinking about like, what makes candidates stay in or leave a process, so and feedback. So is there a survey after they apply? Like, how would you rate the process, the communication? How long did it take you to apply? Is there something like that? No. Is that something you all are thinking about or open to?
we're open to any conversation. I would just
love
push you,
feedback.
but I would say I would push on this, is I don't sort of see it as like the way you're, and I don't mean this in any, I mean this respectfully. It's not like we're open to all of it. This is our school district collectively, so we're happy to engage in these conversations. So, yeah,
And I'm asking the question from a point of like, if there's actually no, like, no, I'm in a governance role, not a do this. So I'm just throwing things out. If you're like, actually, no, we wouldn't want to do that. I would want to hear that.
I mean, we may have people like, well, I wasn't hired, I'm not happy, you know.
Yeah, good feedback. I was also curious around, I see with this process, are there time expectations that you all, like, for example, like, it should take this long from application to contact, from contact to interview?
yeah. So I think this is what,
Yes.
this is our last slide, so I can, if it's helpful. And I don't need to read this to you all, but in general, there's a lot of, like, one of the fascinating things about HR is every circumstance is very fact specific, right? How many candidates are there? Are they certified? Is the hiring manager available? When is this person actually, when is vacancy opening? So what we try to do, so we have sort of guidelines, is usually a posting is going to be up for either 5 days if we're trying to expedite it. Like must fill, let's get to 10 days is standard, and then until filled, which are a number of hours where we can't find folks. So that's how we set those up. And then once that time is over, we need to sort of screen our candidates, make sure that we can actually initiate them into the process, and that can take up another week or two, depending on the time of year and the number of openings. And then we have our interviews. So usually, and this is a little confusing how we set this up, but if a posting closes, right? So we might have a posting up for 2 weeks, would be the minimum. Usually that's our 14 days. And then we're going to be screening and try to get the interviews going within another week or two, depending on how usually you need. It takes a week to convene a committee. And so it often will take up to 2 weeks to get everyone together. And then once we do that, there's going to be the interview process. Within the interview process, sometimes we have to string out the interviews, like 3 today or tomorrow. So that can take another week or so. And then we have to start getting into the calling of references, looking at recommendations, background checks. One of the biggest things that can cause problems for us is fingerprint clearance, for example. If someone's not fingerprinted, we cannot hire them. Not even if they said they went to get fingerprinted, until it clears, we can't bring them in. So there's those types of things. So
does that have an impact on certified instructional as much, because that's part of the first step of applying for certification as fingerprint clearance. But we'll see this for certified, yes.
So overall, from the time something's posted, right, meaning like when a before that, a hiring manager will put in a recommendation. Sometimes that can take a week or so to actually get posted, because we have to make sure that we double check, make sure that position is vacant, that there's that it's budgeted for the year, if not, what budget code. There's some business office processes. We have some approval chains in our workflows to make sure they all get checked off on. It could be a week or two after that's inputted, then you have another couple of weeks. So it can take up to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks to go through that whole process. There's also the timing of the board meeting. Like if we interviewed anyone today and we have a board meeting next Tuesday, we're going to have to get them an offer, get a response, make sure that they're fingerprinted, make sure they're certified, make sure that they have a start date within 5 business days, which rarely can happen that quickly. So the timing of when a board meets can be challenging. Not that it's not like that's just how it is.
Have we lost candidates based on that?
Oh, probably, yeah. I mean, but I wouldn't say it's because of when the board meets, it's because of a lot of things in take time. So, which really does lead to a great discussion on where are the areas where we might be able to punch that down, which I'm sure you all have questions about. We'd love to talk about it.
And we've tried to tweak things in terms of putting someone on the personnel report pending fingerprint clearance and onboarding. And then we've seen that, okay, if that doesn't happen and we have to go back and make a change. So what is the best way, the cleaner way? We've tried different so to speed up the process.
What, if any, are checks and balances that are in place, you know, the few stories that you hear about, like, somebody applied and they never heard back, or, you know, whatever, are there, especially in these like computer systems that kind of remind you about people in different stages of this that can help reduce the chances of that happening?
Yeah, I mean, so, and the main check and balance is the hiring manager and the HR office. So usually between the two of those, you know, we want to fill that position, they're going to be like, hey, what's the status of this position? So that's like the main check and balance, that sort of verbal dialogue, because we have vacancies. Other checks on this often are folks in our unions might be like, hey, we're still waiting for this position to be filled, what's the status? That's probably that big first one. You know,
Also the division of our workflow in HR. So that has changed throughout the years, where now, you know, it used to be that we would have it divided by bargaining unit. And it could be that, you know, the person that has teachers and is hiring 50 teachers when is overloaded with handling all of these processes for a teacher. And so we've changed it to have, like, we have an onboarding person. They handle all of the onboarding, it's consistent, and they're, you know, we have another person that's doing the postings, and then they can focus on that instead of, so the workflow has helped to create checks and balances, more checks and balances, because there's a lot of, I's, you know, like T's to cross and I's to dot in the process. And so, looking at the division of duties so that we can create those checks and balances.
And how many people are in the HR department?
So we have right now, 5 admin assistants, or 4. Yeah, 4 admin assistants and outside.
All right, thank you. We have like 1 minute, so if you guys have anything super burning, it's really, really short, but otherwise, seems like a good time to wrap up.
What are the next steps?
What's next? First, I would just say-
Oh, yeah. Yes, is boss.
Okay, well, thank you. I think this has been two meetings now of like going through this entire process that I think gave us a lot of like information to, not like seeing myself on that screen.
I know.
Trish, that's good.
So,
Yeah.
to reflect on and to think about the like opportunities that there are. And it's always really great being able to hear from you all about where you think that those opportunities are, and that you would be kind of like excited about diving into more. So I think another conversation probably offline with Zach, and that I would like to think that we'll come back with like a plan of a way to kind of move forward and take the kind of focus more concretely on a couple of the pieces that we've all heard about.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it.